My name is Alana. Welcome to my YouTube channel. And on this channel, I review books. Mainly, that's predominantly what I do. I review books, the occasional book haul, the occasional tag. And I am back this week with a surprise, another book review. And this book review I'm really quite excited about because I have a lot to talk about. And I'm going to go into some myth variations with this and discuss things that I think why Ariadne as a mythological retelling is so good and so successful, because I think it is worth the hype. So, also look at this stunning cover. Oh, it's so good. The Brits get the best covers, okay? I would say 99% of the time, you Brits get the best covers. Oh, I had to get this shipped from Oxford, okay? And then get it shipped across the pond because I was not feeling the US copy. Don't get me wrong, it's not bad, but they just put gold foil on everything and I'm sold. I danced in the slow, simmering anger, boiled to rage in my veins, propelling me onwards until I dropped in the dead center of the floor, hopelessly entangled in scarlet skeins, panting for breath and waiting for the heavy clouds that fogged my brain and my vision to clear. So Ariadne, the infamous Ariadne by Jennifer Saint, is a retelling of the Greek myth about Ariadne and the tragic Greek hero, the stud, the one, the only, the Theseus. Except in this book, we really take a peek at Theseus. Because we're looking at this from the perspectives, or this book is really told from their perspectives as Ariadne and her sister Phaedra. So the chapters go back and forth between Phaedra and Ariadne. Ariadne and her sister, they're the daughters of King Minos of Crete, and she falls in love with Theseus, the prince of Athens, who has come to kill the Minotaur. Which is a half human, half bull that lives in the labyrinth of the Cretan palace. The Minotaur came about when their mother was really under the influence of the gods, made to fall in love with a bull. And then out of that union, we get a half human, half bull. Okay. And this creature is bloodthirsty. Okay. Yeah, it's wild. And so they have to keep this Minotaur in the labyrinth of Crete, or else it's going to eat everything and everybody around. And so, but in order to placate this bloodthirst, on an annual basis, 14 young boys and girls are brought in from surrounding areas to be fed to the Minotaur. That sounds like Hunger Games to me. And I learned recently that the person who wrote Hunger Games, Suzanne Collins, is that her name? Was actually inspired by this myth, so I wasn't making that up. Trust your hunches, people. And so anyway, long story short, Ariadne chooses to help Theseus because she is just like, who is this man? He's beautiful. I want to help you. I'm in love. She can't resist the biceps and the abs. Not much has changed. She does help Theseus. She conspires against Crete and she helps Theseus to kill her half-brother. But in doing so, Jennifer Saint goes into the relationship between Theseus and Ariadne and just how poorly treated she was treated by Theseus. So one can't really discuss the Greek myths, even its modern retellings, because it is a crucial point in the Greek myths about how the gods treat humans as pawns. Gods might enjoy mortal skill in hunting or music or weaving, but they are always alert to whose skills came close to those of the divine. It seemed the night skies were littered with the mortals who had encountered the gods and now stood as blazing examples to the world below of what the immortals could do. So saint is really showing here how humans, and particularly women, which is a common theme that we see in this wave of Greek retellings from the female perspective, how women in particular are the whims often, are the victims of the whims of the gods and these renowned heroes that have been idolized for the past 2,000 years. And those heroes who have high favor from the gods, they get away with a lot more than your average mortal, especially the women. And that's kind of how these contemporary Greek how the current Greek retellings that we see popping up, that's what they're addressing here, because it's mainly women who are writing them, and they're bringing out these female characters. So Ariadne and her sister muse over this over the entire duration of this story in an attempt to take control over their own lives. However, the irony is that fate also plays a huge role in the Greek myths. Once something is decided, it's decided. And even if the individual has this desire to act autonomously, it's almost as if there's only really so much that they can do. Even if they think that they're being an individual, they're acting with freedom, they're acting autonomously. Are they really? Because you've got this network of the gods who can influence and enthuse, is the word that you would use in the Greek myth, to enthuse humans and those around them to manipulate the way they want to. So what I'm going to actually spend the bulk of this particular reviewing is I'm going to discuss how Saint portrays Theseus and Dionysus. And you may be like, Alana, this is a story from the female perspective. Yes, but this is still about Theseus, right? This is really a retelling to give a perspective on Theseus that has probably been softened throughout the years, the way that we look at these Greek heroes. And also Dionysus, because as I mispronounced his name earlier. It's Dionysus. Because I actually think that they're the focus here. They're the men. They are the two dominant male characters in this tale that get assessed. So that's who I'm going to spend my time on, because they're actually the most fascinating. There will be mild spoilers because these are ancient myths, and I can't discuss this without getting into some of the details. Also, they're ancient, so how much am I really spoiling? Not much. Because the ultimate outcome is the ultimate outcome. It is what it is. So in this retelling, Saint Theseus is very cold and cruel, but that is still in line with many of the ancient characterizations of him, depending on which ancient group, area in Greece is telling his myth. But she does give him some nuances, especially in the beginning, of course, because he's wooing Ariadne. He's charming and he's a good storyteller, and she's looking at him like, this man is a stud. I can't blame her. She's like, look at this man is nothing but muscle. Okay. And yet he's still calculating. But Saint does still remind us by the end that he is still a human being and a mortal man. He turned. I had seen him fired up with glorious purpose. I had seen him in the flesh of victory when he strode out of the labyrinth. I had seen his face suffused with a tender intimacy I have never dreamed was false, but I had never seen him broken. His face sagged, collapsed in on itself. So let's chat a bit about Theseus and how his myths vary depending on, again, who's telling this myth. There are variations from the Cretan Theseus and the Athenian Theseus. We're not writing papers here. So, yes, Theseus, after they kill the Minotaur, they escape because she's pretty much committed treason against Crete. They swim away, they sail away, and they tuck away in an island. Theseus abandons Ariadne. In Crete, the common consensus was that Theseus only lured Ariadne away because she was a means to an end. He needed to use her to kill the Minotaur, check that off his to-do list, and move on with his business. So Saint is using the Cretan version of this myth, and that makes sense because the story is being told by the perspective of Cretans, Ariadne and her sister. So they're going to have this perspective. I think that's fair. Theseus had not left me because I was at fault or because I did not matter. He had left because, to him, nothing mattered at all beyond the cold pursuit of his fame. Now, the Athenians favored a kinder Theseus, which I also think makes sense. He was their mythological hero, their prince. The Athenians loved Theseus as a character, as a myth, as a Greek hero. The Athenians' version of this story portray Theseus as a victim of the gods also, in which he was deceived by the gods. Some assume Dionysus, because he was like, I want that girl. And so he was deceived, is what they claim, to leave Ariadne. The Athenians could not fathom a hero that would be that much of a jerk. They wanted a hero, they valued a hero that was kinder than that. Even if not all of his faults could be forgiven, they just could not fathom a hero that would be that cold-hearted. Again, they didn't forgive all of his flaws, but they yearned to have a hero or a heroic figure who was still palatable and humane. Theseus is actually the most complex and nuanced at times of all the other ancient Greek heroes to kind of understand. He's quite cryptic throughout his labors and his myths and his stories. You can't always, even as a reader, try to figure out his reasoning. Why is he doing this? Why is he not doing that? He's an enigma. He's abstract. And so there's a lot to play around with when it comes to Theseus's stories. But he was also extremely intelligent and smart and strong. Whereas Heracles was just all brawn. Theseus was, yes, very strong physically, but mentally he had a lot of wit. I was going to make an Odysseus comparison, but not today. I need to think about that a little more. So yes, Theseus is a little bit more complex. He's got brains and beauty. I'm here for it. I'm sounding basic. I have no shame. So I prefer, personally, the Athenian portrayal of Theseus because he's just much more interesting and complex and multifaceted and gray. I like gray characters. Characters who are just blatantly black and white are a little bit more boring to me on the page, but the Athenian version of Theseus is a gold mine. You can analyze him for days and never get bored. But again, Jennifer Saint's writing and portrayal of Theseus is still historically accurate and true to Theseus, according to many Greek myths, especially from the perspective of the Cretans. Also, in this myth, Ariadne does go into the myth of Hippolyta and Hippolytus. Hippolyta was an Amazonian queen, if you will. She fell victim to a love affair with an ancient hero, but there are variations on which hero that was. There are myths that say it was Heracles, and then there are myths that say it was Theseus, and that these two were married at one time. Many versions, however, that I've read, Heracles kind of dominates, but Theseus, there are some versions of Theseus. Both Heracles and Theseus went on labors. Like, they had to go travel all around and kill and slay this and slay that in order to, it was a means to an end. There are also puns here. So Theseus, in some of the myths in which it's Heracles coming in contact with the Amazonians, Theseus may or may not have even been present. Heracles is also older than Theseus, and Theseus did look up to Heracles because he was like, I want to be just like him. He's amazing. That's my Kim K voice. Heracles was hated by Hera, Zeus's wife. So when he came in contact with the Amazonian queen. As you can imagine, she's going to get the shortest end of the stick here. Hera manipulated this, and it ultimately ended up in Hippolyta dying, getting killed, but not before, of course, they get it on, and Hippolytus is the consequence of those actions. Now, in variations, it's Theseus, and then you get Hippolytus as well, so he has the son. Jennifer Saint is using the version of the myths in which it's Theseus and not Heracles. Again, I'll allow it. She's spot on. She's not inaccurate. There are various versions of these myths. I will say that I wish that this book had endnotes and maybe some author's notes about her process of going through these myths and the various versions of them and how she pieced them together to form this story. Because if you are new to the Greek myths and you've never read the story of the Minotaur, Theseus, Ariadne, Theseus's labors, you don't know anything about Heracles and all of his labors, you might take this at face value. And I think it's helpful to know that for the sake of the story that Jennifer Saint is telling, she chose certain myths over others. That's just my 2 cents, which is fine. There's nothing. I just think it would be an interesting learning moment and a good learning moment to have at the end notes, so that if people want to explore who may be new to these myths, they know where to go. Or they kind of, stick a pin in that. Oh, that's interesting that there's some variation here. Most people may not know that there are variations in these myths. Okay, let's talk about Dionysus, the god of wine, little g god. I think that he's actually the most fascinating character in this book, which I don't know if that was supposed to be done on purpose. To me, he is the most complex. He is the most dynamic. He is the most gray. He's also a hot mess. I think in a way, he reads more like a tragic hero than any of the others, even the women. I mean, is that sacrilege to say because it's supposed to be a feminist retelling? Dionysus, man. I felt for my guy in this book. Probably because I found all of the other characters, including Ariadne, including Phaedra, including Theseus, to be flatter characters, and not necessarily in a bad way. Dionysus is very interesting to me. I cannot love another mortal. I see them vain and stupid, puffed up. I cannot love another immortal. I see them vain and stupid, puffed up with their own importance and their petty cruelties. Mortals may age, but the gods are prisoners of their own infantile whimsies, never capable of change and never knowing what it is to love because they dare not risk the suffering loss. Debatable, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. His point of view is debatable because has he read the Iliad? If you read the Iliad, yeah. Anyway, sidebar. Dionysus is definitely contradicting himself here. He's being a little bit hypocritical. And he's speaking to Ariadne. Spoiler alert, they get booed up. I'm here for it. But you still can't deny that he's not fascinating. He's still a god. There is a part of him that wants to be glorified. It's in his nature. But there's also a part of him that is a little bit more sympathetic to the human cause than perhaps other Greek gods. And that is where his complexity comes in, because he's kind of at a tug of war here. Is his more humanitarian side, because he's so sympathetic and empathetic to humans, going to win out over his immortal side and vice versa? That is where his complexity comes in. And again, like I said, yes, this is a female retelling. Yes, this is a feminist retelling. Ariadne and Phaedra are our main characters here. But Dionysus, he takes the cake for me. He is so interesting. I could have just listened to this dude talk in this book all day. He's, like I said, he's a hot mess. In the end, especially what he does at the end, and again, this is not a spoiler because these myths are old, you're like, my guy, that ego. But he shows so much more emotion, he shows way more emotion in this book than Theseus does. So he, for me, was my favorite character. I was feeling it. That's why this book is covered in grape leaves. Wine. I really enjoyed Ariadne. I'm going to put this down. I mean, that was a bit of I kind of went on like the background of more of these myths and why I think why this book is so successful is because it's well written and well researched. I thought it was very engaging. I was never bored throughout the entirety of this book, which I cannot say for Circe. I know that book is loved. Okay, I know, but I'm not a fan. That book put me to sleep. It was boring, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, okay? I'm nobody. And also, like I said, I couldn't really get on with that version of Odysseus that Madeline Miller portrays. And don't get me wrong, Odysseus is a snake. He is a weasel. His brain, he's always calculating and playing games. But he's still funny. Like, Odysseus is a card, okay? He is so funny. Also, if you read the Odyssey, Odysseus is incredibly complex, the way that Homer portrays him. He's so fascinating. He is actually quite an emotional being. And I felt like in Circe, he's quite flat. And I get it, it's not Odysseus' story, it's Circe's story, but can't you give my boy something? Dang. Odysseus to me is a fascinating character. But what Jennifer Saint does successfully here is she uses the Cretan portrayal of Theseus, which is accurate. The myth is accurate. Dionysus is accurate. He's very interesting. And I wouldn't say that Theseus isn't interesting. He's just a little bit more static. But it's not boring. This book is not boring at all. It has some beautifully written passages in it. It's not cringy. She did a really good job, especially for this being a debut novel. She did her homework. She also writes this myth that's not in a way that's not confusing. So if you're new to the Greek myths, this is not going to be something that's going to be intimidating. I also think that if you're familiar with these myths and you're familiar with these characters, this is where contemporary Greek myth retellings get really fun. You get to dissect them and do some analysis and compare them to the primary sources and the original translations, and compare them to Homer, compare them to Ovid, etc. Compare them to Stephen Fry's collection of Troy and the heroes and mythos, those works, because what Stephen Fry does is he is telling the myths, but he gives multiple perspectives, and he has footnotes and endnotes and all that stuff to help you piece together the fabric and the framework of what these myths are and the time and place in which they're happening. So Saint did a really good job, because this Theseus, this Ariadne, this Dionysus, this Phaedra makes sense. It would make sense to the ancient Greeks, I would say, and I think it makes sense and is palatable for a modern reader to get on with. I think it's totally fair here for Theseus to be portrayed as a complete and utter jerk, because this is the perspective of Ariadne and Phaedra, and they get a short stick, okay? They're getting the shortest end of the stick. Okay? So, I enjoyed it. This was a really good retelling. I'm excited to read a lecture by Jennifer Saint, which I'll probably get to next year. Have you read this Greek myth retelling? Did you like Ariadne? If you read her other novel, Electric, that lecture that was released this year, which one do you think is better? I gave this book a 4 out of 5. I enjoyed it. I'm glad that I own this. This will be a great resource to have as I continue my journey of rediscovering Greek myths. Because again, I have plenty of Greek myths and Greek myth retellings on my 2023 TBR. I'm not going to read Electra until I reread the Iliad for the third time. It's been 10 years since I've read the Iliad, so I need to refresh my memory. I want to visit Homer before I go into the retellings. I am currently reading Troy by Stephen Fry. Man, it's good. It's my favorite one out of the 3 so far. I have a thing for Achilles, I'm just going to say. He's my favorite hero. Odysseus and Achilles. Studs. All right. Let's get back to Ariadne. Have you read this? Any thoughts? Leave me your comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow me on Instagram where I get up to more bookish shenanigans, and I will see you in the next one.